Hello, this is Miss Story, and I wanted to explain how to write the rhetorical analysis essay for your American Rhetoric project. So you're going to need a copy of your annotated speech that you worked on in class yesterday, and a copy of the rhetorical analysis tips sheet. And this is the rhetorical analysis tip sheet. It just goes over basically what I'm going to go over in this PowerPoint, but it has some more detail and some more explanation in written form. So you can also see that here at the bottom, this is not in the PowerPoint, it adds some strong verbs that you could possibly use in your analysis. So this is a great resource for you all as you're writing. It also has some tips on analyzing diction, which we have done quite a bit of this in class. It has some terms for looking at diction, tone, syntax. So this is just a useful little resource for you all. Lastly, you're just going to need a Word document to type your essay. So what is a rhetorical analysis essay? Okay, what is it not? It is not a summary. This is kind of important because you don't want to spend your whole paper just summarizing what your speech is about. You don't just want to explain what your speech means or what the speaker meant. Instead, you want to write an essay that analyzes the rhetorical strategies that a writer uses to achieve his or her purpose. So if you think about the strategies we've been talking about in class in terms of the rhetorical appeals, how is the speaker using a particular word or phrase to appeal to the emotions of the audience? How is the speaker using specific facts or evidence or reasoning to appeal to his audience's logic? How is the speaker using their own credibility or their own connections with the audience, their shared values with the audience to explain the purpose? Rhetorical analysis is not what the writer says. Rhetorical analysis is how the writer says what she says and why. So what you're going to do is you're going to apply your critical reading skills in order to break down the text. In essence, you break off the parts from the whole, right? We talked a minute ago about ethos, logos, and pathos, or the emotional appeals, the logical appeals, the character appeals, right? Those are parts of the whole. And even in those parts, you may notice that an author is using a lot of figurative language or similes and metaphors to appeal to the emotions of the audience, right? That again is breaking off a part from the whole. You're going to identify the rhetorical situation just as you've done in your notes, and then you're going to use choices. You could use diction or syntax. You can use rhetorical appeals, ethos, logos, pathos, rhetorical strategies. The rhetorical strategies are some of those items in your terms list, and I will look there real quick with you. These terms for rhetorical analysis, terms like diction and syntax, tone, allusion, irony, imagery, metaphor, simile, personification, hyperbole, antithesis, rhetorical question, repetition, alliteration, anaphora, or maybe it's anaphora. Parentheses, using these dashes here to set apart an idea. So any of these are rhetorical strategies, right? And we looked at these yesterday. So these are all items that you can use to help you break off the parts from the whole. Ultimately, what you're going to want to do is create a cohesive essay with an introduction, a couple body paragraphs, and a conclusion that explain how the author achieves his or her purpose. So this is a little bit review here. But what you're going to have to do, I think, when you look at your notes and at your annotated copy of your speech, is pick apart which, maybe just pick apart 3 strategies that you thought really, really worked well with this particular audience for this particular purpose. Okay, so this is the analysis part. Without this, you are just summarizing the text. So, choose a few strategies from the speech that you noted in your annotations and you thought these are the things that are really working. And then you're going to go on and write about how those strategies helped the author achieve his or her purpose. You're going to go on to explain why the author chose those strategies for that particular audience and that particular occasion. All right, so when you go to write your introduction, I've got a little model for you, and you can use soapstone to help you write this. Let's just read it through one time together. So this is for an essay that written by author Amy Tan, essay called Fish Cheeks. So in our opening sentence, we have novelist Amy Tan, in her narrative essay Fish Cheeks, recounts an embarrassing Christmas Eve dinner when she was 14 years old. Tan's purpose is to convey the idea that, at 14, she wasn't able to recognize the love her mother had for her or the sacrifices she made. She adopts a sentimental tone in order to appeal to similar feelings and experiences in her adult readers. Let's break this down. In the first sentence, you notice that we have identified the title, Fish Cheeks, the author, Amy Tan, and the genre, narrative essay. This has a handy little acronym, TAG, and it's useful anytime you are referring to a text for the first time. So we're going to start with the tag, and then we're going to move on to discuss the subject. Okay, so the subject of her essay is an embarrassing Christmas Eve dinner. That's what it's about. And then the occasion is when she was 14 years old, and maybe it's even Christmas Eve too. But we're putting this all together in one sentence. So the first sentence addresses the speaker, the occasion, and the subject together. The second sentence is going to go on to deal more with the purpose. Tan's purpose is to convey the idea that at 14 she wasn't able to recognize the love her mother had for her or the sacrifices she made, right? So ultimately, what's her goal here? And finally, the third sentence in this little 3-sentence intro, she adopts a sentimental tone in order to appeal to similar feelings and experiences in her adult readers. So this is addressing tone, but it's also addressing audience, and I probably should have put that here in the slide. So, you want to identify the tone of your piece or your speech and explain who the audience is and why that tone would be fitting for that audience. So I would recommend stopping right now and looking at this model and writing your introduction. Okay, moving on to your body paragraphs. What you're going to need to do is divide your text into sections and discuss the beginning, the middle, and the end of your speech. Now, if you have chosen a very long speech, this might be a little bit more difficult, but you want to break it down into 3 short sections. On the actual AP exam, this will be a lot easier because the length of the text will not be any longer than 1 to 1.5 pages. So every analysis paragraph must, first of all, identify the part of the text that you are explaining by using transition words and strong verbs to explain what is being said. Again, if you look back on that rhetorical analysis tip sheets, you'll see that I have for you some transition words and strong verbs that you can use to help you. Second, it must identify the strongest rhetorical strategies used in that particular section. This includes incorporating specific text examples, exact words from the text, into your own words. Do not try to discuss every strategy the writer uses. Pick the strongest. This is key. For this project, you're only writing 350 to 400 words, so you are not going to be able to talk about everything. This is why you just have to choose the ones you think that are the strongest, the ones that interest you the most. You are the writer here, so you get to pick. Third, clearly and specifically explain how the rhetorical strategies are used to help the writer achieve his purpose and reach his audience. So if you don't do this, you are not analyzing the speech. You have to explain how the strategies meet the needs of the audience, how the strategies help the speaker achieve his or her purpose. Let's look at an example from President Reagan's speech after the Shuttle Challenger explosion in the 1980s. I'll read it through once and then break down the parts. Reagan begins his tribute to the Challenger astronauts by acknowledging that the shuttle accident has appropriately postponed his planned State of the Union address and by expressing the depth of his and his wife's personal grief. He appeals to the mournful emotions of the audience by admitting that he and Nancy are pained to the core, that today is rightfully a day for mourning and remembering, and that the accident is truly a national loss. He joins in this time of mourning in order to unify the nation and humbly admit that we share this pain with all of the people of our country. This outpouring of emotion from the president conveys a calming tone that reassures the nation that their grief is both understandable and proper. So, in this first section, the red, you need to identify which section of the text you're discussing and the main idea. This is the says. So, this is saying it's the beginning, right? Reagan begins his tribute. Then you're going to go on and you're going to provide support of the main idea by looking at the strategy. He appeals to the mournful emotions. Okay, so now we know we're looking at the pathos. He appeals to the mournful emotion, and then we are looking at specific phrases that appeal to this mournful emotion. Pain to the core. Today is rightfully a day for mourning and remembering. A national loss. So each of these phrases are basically the textual evidence for the strategy of appealing to pathos. This next section, how the rhetorical strategies help the writer achieve his purpose. In order to, why does he appeal to these emotions? Well, he does this to join in this time of mourning, to unify the nation, and humbly claim that we share this pain, right? So his purpose is to unify the nation. And then finally, this outpouring of emotion from the president conveys a calming tone. So what is the effect? We know this is his purpose, but what's the effect of these words on the audience? So you go on to explain the effect on the audience. So I would go ahead and write the first body paragraph for the first section that you have chosen of your speech. Recap each body paragraph. You need some kind of transition, the main idea of that section, the strategy, and a quote. Explain how the quote is an example, and then tie it into the overall purpose and effect on the audience. This is one more strategy that you can use, the sweep strategy. And then your conclusion.